Like I say, we may have talked about positive tests. I never, ever indicated that it was anything connected to do with a violation of the protective order.
Well, didn't you tell them when you went to see Skyhorse that your book would have explosive allegations against Barry Bonds?
Listen,
did you yes or no?
No, I did not.
You never told them there would be...
I never told them that. In fact, if you look at the book proposal, it says there are 5 or 6 different categories. Marion Jones is first. 4th or 5th or 6th down the line in the single heading says Barry Bonds and Jason Giambi. They don't even get Barry doesn't even get his own paragraph. And it says Victor will tell the truth about the fact that he never gave Barry Bonds steroids. That's what it says. The second sentence says he will also tell how he helped Barry with his father who was dying of cancer. That's what it says. That's the proposal that was handed to them that day. That was the representation, that I never gave steroids to Barry Bonds. Okay, go look at the proposal.
Did you ever tell them at the time that there was a protective order in place that would limit what you could say about Barry Bonds?
At that meeting, and I said this last Wednesday, that proposal was basically written by Nathan Jendrick and Molly. At that meeting, it was very brief. It was inside what I would call a closet for an office. There wasn't even room for 3 chairs, so Mark Weinstein had to stand up. And Molly did 80% of the talking. And they asked me a few questions, and I answered, and we left.
Did you say anything about a protective order?
No, I don't recall.
Didn't you think that was relevant to tell them that some of what you couldn't write was subject to a protective order?
By the time we got there, this issue of the protective order, anybody in the world of sports, and especially sports journalism, who had an interest in a Balco book, to not know that, in my opinion, is ridiculous. And to claim not to know it. This had been headline news. It had been on 2020 in front of 15 million viewers. You know, this was common knowledge to anyone in the world of sport.
And you didn't think it was worthwhile mentioning it?
It probably was not mentioned. There was a very brief meeting.
How long was the meeting?
20 minutes.
Who said what to whom? 1 minute. Yeah, by the way, you had an affidavit in which we can pull it out where you said the meeting took an hour. Was it an hour or was it 20 minutes?
The reality is, it's a couple of years ago. I went there with Molly. We sat in this little office for a brief period of time. She did most of the talking, and I walked out. If it was 20 minutes or an hour, it's whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know how important that is.
Well, again, I'd like to ask about...
I didn't have much to say.
What did you say about Barry Bonds?
They knew what I had to say about Barry Bonds because they'd read the proposal, that I never gave him steroids.
So how does it that the issue of him failing tests came up during that conversation?
It didn't.
So now you're tested. That's an out-and-out lie by Mr. Weinstein.
I don't believe this issue of the failed test came up.
So Mr. Weinstein's lying.
Mr. Weinstein has his opinion.
But he's not, I mean, you're saying, we're clear, it never came up.
I don't recall that it did.
Okay. Do you know whether the number of tests that Barry Bonds took came up?
I know what the government has alleged.
What does the government allege?
I don't know that to be true.
What is
that there were 3 positive tests.
Okay. Did you know that the government, as of as of December of 2007, was there any government report to the effect that there had been failings of 3 tests?
I believe, alleged, and I believe there had been.
If I take my representation that we've been unable to find one such publication, that it didn't come out until at least February of 2008, when the government made a filing, I would like to know what your basis was.
That's my recollection. That's the basis.
That's your record. Because if it hadn't come out, you would agree with me that if there had been no public disclosure of the possibility of there being a failure of 3 tests, the only way you would have known that there had been a failure of 3 tests was from seeing grand jury information.
Once again, I'm going to have to school you here, Judd. That information's not in the grand jury transcript, okay?
You shouldn't be talking about if it was under protective order. Is it under protective order as we speak today?
What?
Is it under?
Yes, it is. It is.
Well, let me just ask you this. Well, this is the fact that he took 3 drug tests is not under a protective order anymore. It's in all the papers. Well, let me ask you this. Other than you having seen it, other than you having seen a media report that the government was alleging that Barry Bonds had failed 3 tests, was there any source of information you had at that time that would allow you to make the claim of 3 failed drug tests?
I don't know. It could be an attorney-client privilege information. I'm not sure.
I'm going to object because one of the problems, the way you're asking the question, I think from what we've heard today, it's getting into the who's alleging or what. The government has alleged that he failed 3 drug tests, I think, is where they're at. I don't believe the witness's testimony is he believes that.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that.
So the question, how would the government, his source of thinking that the government knows that Bonds allegedly failed 3 drug tests?
No, the question is as follows. I'll give you the chronology. Until at least February 2008, and it may have been March, there was no public information in the media, because we've done it exhaustively. There was no public information that suggested that Bonds had failed 3 drug tests or had taken 8 drug tests. Okay?
All right.
The details of that only came out into the public once the protective order was lifted.
Well, it was
That's not true.
According to you, it was written about sometime after the date of this protective order.
Right. It was the government. Some of the drug test stuff was released when the government made a motion.
I gotcha.
In opposition to a motion to dismiss, but the full detail of the number of tests and the failings of the alleged failings of the test were not public knowledge. So my question is to you: are you saying that when you spoke with Mr. Weinstein in December of 2007, that you never stated that Bonds, it had been alleged that Bonds had failed?
I don't believe that I did. What I can see here is that he had this information at some point before he wrote the letter, which was September the 11th of 2008. And he also references that I may have told him this several times. So I don't believe it occurred on that first day. No, I do not.
Yeah.
And all we know for sure is that he was aware of this information after it was released in February and April of 2008 when he wrote his email in September of 2008. That's what we know.
We'll see. I don't think that's what we know, but let me go back again. I want you to assume, for the purposes of this question, that Mr. Weinstein was accurately reporting that in December of 2007, when you first had the meeting with him, you said that Bonds had taken 8 tests and 3 positives, and had 3 positives, but that this information was off the record.
First of all, I never said that.
Don't answer the question. Here's the problem, Jeff. His testimony is exactly contradictory. And is contradicts.
Let me try it again.
One second. Let me just see if we can get there. The second part, assume the follow-up question is, you're going to say, assuming that's true and assuming you said it, does it violate the...
No, I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
All I'm saying is something different.